Welcome to Peekskill and Primary Source again. My name is Rachel Stock. I am the local history librarian. I am going to begin our presentation today. And off camera a moment ago, Francisco had mentioned that we're recording the presentation. I just want to clarify that if for some reason the technology, you can't turn your camera off, that's okay. It's not required. We just want to protect your privacy if that is what you wish for. So if you can't, don't worry. So again, here we go. I'm going to start with our PowerPoint presentation. And I am going to hang on one second. Sorry about that. There we go. Okay, Peekskill and Primary Source. Let me get into present mode. Are we in present mode, Francisco? Can we see?
Yes, you're good.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so welcome to Peekskill and Primary Sources for the second or third time. My name is Rachel Stock. I am the local history librarian at the Field Library. I'm also charged with taking care of the Colin T. Naylor Jr. archives, which holds a ton of amazing local history artifacts and manuscripts, maps, genealogies, the list goes on and on. Today, in celebration of the statue that we have in Peekskill of Harriet Tubman, we are presenting some information about the Underground Railroad, specifically about Peekskill. And then we also want people to feel empowered to be able to research the Underground Railroad on their own. And so here we go. Today, we are going to discuss the Underground Railroad in Peekskill. We're going to ask, what is a primary source? Then we're going to ask questions about how we access primary sources at the Colin T. Naylor Jr. archives. And then finally, we're going to talk about some other resources that you can use along with the primary sources that we discover in the archives in order to kind of fill out your research. So I'm going to be providing you today with a very short introduction to the Underground Railroad. I would like to make it really, I would like everyone to know that I am not an expert on this topic at all. There have been so many scholars that have written amazing work about it. And again, I'll be sharing some of that later on. But in terms of, for our purposes, we're going to cover a really short introduction. So Peekskill is one city, but it featured 3 different quote unquote stops on the Underground Railroad. The first stop that I would like to discuss, I really found in my own research incredibly interesting. I think that Holly and Harriet Peterson Green and their home at 1112 Main Street is a really excellent example of the way that free Black individuals helped enslaved African Americans in our community. Holly Green and his wife Harriet, also named Harriet, were successful business people in Peekskill. The corner where the buildings that they owned became known as Holly's Corner. And again, I think that this provides us with an excellent example of the way that formerly enslaved individuals were helping themselves to freedom. It sort of centers the story around the enslaved experience and shows the way that they helped one another rather than being, sort of saved. The Greens were tightly linked with Quaker groups. And I think that if anybody is interested in researching a topic that hasn't been written about a whole ton, starting with Holly and Harriet Peterson Green would be a great place to start. And later on in the presentation, I'm going to show you some of the pieces that we have in the archive that sort of correspond to these stops. So the second stop, an additional stop was the Harriet Ward Beecher homestead. They had a tunnel in the back of their property that acted as a place where people were able to find shelter and meet up with other individuals that were helping them along their way. The AME Zion Church in Peekskill is Harriet Tubman and the AME Zion Church have a well-documented sort of relationship. There was a false panel built behind the pulpit and included several rooms where people could take cover as they waited to continue on their journey. Finally, the Sands home is a place where enslaved individuals came to the Hudson River by boat. They followed the McGregor Brook to safety via to the Sands home, and it remains an important part of Peekskill history in terms of there were many different places in Peekskill, not just one. So we're really lucky as a community to have that as part of our legacy. So moving along, sort of after that, as I said, very brief introduction to the Underground Railroad in Peekskill. I'm going to sort of shift us to the conversation. We're going to talk about what primary sources are. We're going to discuss the definition of them, and then I'm going to give you some examples and as we go along some of the examples of the activity on the Underground Railroad that we have down in the archives. I'll have that available for you as well. So I should say as I carry on that I absolutely love primary sources. It has been what has drawn me to my work and the work that I do. They are wonderful documents. So I would just like to pitch primary sources as a way to research and understand. So by definition, primary sources are immediate firsthand accounts of an event. They are from people that had a direct connection to that event, and they are the raw history of data. If you notice on the bottom of my PowerPoint, which I'm going to send to anybody who's interested, there are links. This is my source, the source where I took this information from. So later, if you would like to view that material, you will be able to do that. And anytime there's a link in the presentation, you will be able to click on it and get to the website that I embedded in the slide. At any rate, so some examples of primary sources are diaries and letters. I absolutely love reading diaries. Letters, my grandmother and I wrote letters to each other for several years. So I have my own, you can be the creator of primary sources. We all create primary sources every day. Census data is another good example of a primary source. You can look at census data for all kinds of demographic information. Newspaper articles are also really enjoyable to sort of look through. They also provide a really where diaries and letters provide a really intimate sort of personalized account. Newspapers are good for one, an interpretation that's a little bit more objective, if you will. Economic statistics are also considered a primary source, and then of course photographs and videos. So again, I would just like to reiterate the fact that we are all primary source creators every day, especially with social media, with our phones. So I think it's really cool to think about every time I take a photo, I think to myself, oh, I just created a primary source. So I think that's a really fun way to frame it, and also kind of think of ourselves as creators of history. So one of the most important, as I had mentioned, newspaper articles are a form of a primary source, and at the Colin T. Naylor Jr. archives, we have a wonderful set of newspapers for patrons to use in their research. It's probably one of the largest collections of primary sources that we have in the archives. And if you notice sort of the way that this sheet is set up, it includes the title, and all of that information. But the fun part to me is looking over here in the date ranges. And we can sort of see. So if we look at the Highland Democrat, down in the archives, we have on paper, actually, 1859 through 1931. So when you are deciding what newspaper you want to work with, I would just say keep in mind that the medium really impacts your access to it in terms of how we present it to you. The other source for newspapers that I would point out is New York Historic Newspapers, which I forgot to put in here, but is one of my most favorite places to look for information, to look for newspaper articles as a primary source. As you can see, New York here is broken down into counties, and each county you can specifically search each county. It's a really great tool. I will be giving a presentation in the future about how to navigate this specific site because it is extremely fun and a great way to do research about the Underground Railroad and about a ton of other things as well. So another example, as we discussed, newspaper articles were a form of primary source. This is something, so as I mentioned, Benny had helped me put together some newspaper articles to show you. This is from the Westchester and Putnam Republican in September of 1835. I chose this specifically because it mentions sort of events that were going on in other areas, and I think that it really shows us the ways that the abolitionist movement, it wasn't uniform across states. It was definitely, we were definitely as members of the Westchester community in an area that was different, handled the question of abolition, the abolitionist movement a lot differently. And in this case, they are talking about prosecuting people for uttering, publishing, or circulating within the limits of Mississippi the Liberator, which is a famous abolitionist newspaper that we'll see more of as we go along in the presentation. So as another example, this Westchester and Putnam Republican newspaper article was from September, so only a few days prior. We see that in Westchester County, there's a lot of support for the Liberator. There's a lot of support for the abolitionist movement, and we can infer that that movement was alive and well within our community at that time. As another sort of example of this, is about a month later, is a newspaper article that sort of sets out the idea that slavery in the abstract can find very few advocates, and just sort of highlights again what the community felt in the time that this was created, which is that they were moving away from that as an institution. Another really amazing, this is probably one of the favorite objects or pieces, manuscripts that I found down in the archives, and I would just I'm just thrilled to be able to share it. It is Recollections of My Slavery Days, Days by William Henry Singleton. And I just love the way the librarians in the past described this, a resident of Peekskill, written in 1922. It's just a really great way to experience, as I had mentioned, firsthand accounts of events are really important in historical research, and this is a great example of that. This is a small pamphlet that we have housed, and it even has a picture of Mr. Singleton reading the words in this primary source. It was extremely moving. I think that when we read words from people in their experience, I think it really humanizes people and reminds us that we, at that time period and continue today, to have a lot of work to do in terms of, in terms of a lot of things. But anyway, the next resource that I'd like to show you is the AME Zion Church. As I mentioned earlier, during my brief introduction, the AME Zion Church was really, it had a hidden door behind its pulpit. This is a photograph from our collection. There's a ton of photos of this church at various stages in its history throughout Peekskill. This is the original location. Now it is located elsewhere, but this is the original building. It's a really great shot of it, and yeah. So another important figure in the Underground Railroad in Peekskill was Harriet Ward Beecher. And here I've photographed some photographs that we have in our holdings. I really love these portraits of Mr. and Mrs. Ward Beecher. We also have a couple of photographs of their farm. If you do a Google search with the correct search names, you'll come across photographs of the actual tunnel. This is just a photo of their farm, but nevertheless, somewhere on that property is the tunnel that we spoke of earlier. And I just find these photographs incredibly charming and interesting to look at. And I could see how historians and students and citizen historians would really enjoy using this for research purposes. Another important, as I had mentioned as an example of primary sources, is census records. We have a copy of the first census record of the United States in Westchester County. And one of the things that I think is really important to sort of note is that if you look, so this is the whole document, but if you look in the right corner, we do see that although New York is often heralded as a place of freedom, and it certainly was, but we should acknowledge the fact that this type of thing went on in our community, and we do have primary source documentation to sort of speak to that and question and continue to work on historical narratives. This pamphlet came from the Franklin Couch collection, another one of my very favorite series in our collections. This is a state library bulletin, and as you can see on the cover, it's covers slavery in New York. It's an incredibly interesting document in that it is a lot of very sort of dry facts. It's a little bit unnerving, kind of thinking about it so dryly, to be frank, when you look at it, but it is a great source, and as a primary source really shows us what people were thinking at the time. This is from May 1900, not that far removed from when slavery was an institution in our country. So I think as a source, it's very enlightening in that every decade we get away from historical events, our opinions about them change, and this is a really great early sort of exploration of that topic. And so again, those were some examples of primary sources that we have down in the archives. So now that we have discovered what we have down there, I want very much to empower people in the community to access those primary sources at the Colin T. Naylor Jr. Archives and Field Library. So the next sort of portion of our presentation today will cover that. As I mentioned, I included links in the presentation that I can send to anybody who would like it. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of advanced searching and maybe some stuff on here that you're not totally familiar with, but if you contact me, my information will be given at the end of the presentation. I would be absolutely delighted to show you any of the information that I'm going to present. So just don't feel like you have to take in everything. I know I'm moving fast, but I do want to make you aware of it. And again, if you have questions about how I got somewhere, I'm always happy to respond to reference inquiries. So there's 3 steps in accessing the resources at the Colin T. Naylor Jr. Archives, and I would encourage everybody to observe step 1, which is to visit our website. On our website, we have, which is, as you'll notice, it's from our library website, which is peekskill.org. And I've automatically linked us to the local history page. On this page, it sort of gives you a breakdown of what we have in the archives. The newspaper list that I showed you earlier can be found here. There's also a list of subject files, which we have. Researchers typically find this particular list useful when they are looking for information. And as an example, I will scroll down here and we will look for, it's in here somewhere, ST, oops. So as we see, our subject index also includes 2 folders of information about the Underground Railroad that you can view, that you can come in and view. So definitely take a look at our subject list. We also have a ton of information about a ton of things on this list, and this is sort of a good place to start when you're looking for things by subject. Another thing that I want to point out to us is just so the information that you need to get a hold of us is located on this site, including my email, my phone number, and sort of some of the collection use, and as well as the subject heading file. So the website is an awesome place to start, and I encourage everybody to take a look around. There will be some changes upcoming, so if you come back to it, even though it might look a little different, all of these links that I've featured today in the presentation, they'll still be there. It might just look a little bit different. Again, if you have any questions, you can always give me a call. I absolutely love helping patrons with their reference needs. So after you visit the website to kind of take a look at what we have, the next thing that I would encourage all of our patrons to do is to consult the catalog at the Westchester Library System. The Colin T. Naylor Jr. Archives, our parent organization, is the Field Library, who is part of the Westchester Library System. This isn't necessarily for primary sources, though I will share a little caveat about that later on. But for now, I would encourage everybody to, after they've viewed the website and they have an idea of kind of what's in our archival holdings, to look at what we have in our library system. Again, I'm going to use a sort of advanced search function. I know that we're not all at the same level of understanding about how this works, so just bear with me. I'm gonna go to an advanced search. I'm gonna type in the word slavery. Sort of it's a adjacent topic, and then we're gonna come over and we are going to look in the shelving location box on the bottom, and we are going to scroll down without giving ourselves a migraine. We're going to scroll down and we are going to click on local history. After that, we're going to scroll back up and we're going to hit search, and popping up in our search, we will see, look at that, recollection of my slavery days. It shows us that we have a copy in the Peekskill archives, as well as located in our local history section. The pamphlet that I showed you earlier was actually turned into a book. It's just another example of why it's a good idea, even though we wouldn't normally think of visiting the library website for primary sources. This is a good example of why it's always a good idea to kind of just do your due diligence and take a look. Again, I know we use the advanced search function, but don't let that scare you. I believe in you as a patron, and I believe in myself that we can help you to do a search like this. So do not fear. And so the next, after we've consulted, so the first step was going onto the archives website, then we consulted the catalog. And the next step is, of course, to contact me and let me know that you want to come in and view some materials, and we can have, I really have spent a lot of time throughout my career doing reference requests, and it's something, one of my most favorite parts about the work. So always feel free to give me a call. That is my direct line, and an email. We also have, I'm really happy to announce, a Facebook page now, the Colin T. Naylor Jr. Archives Facebook page. You can contact us through direct messaging there. I check that page every day. And also, as an aside, it's a great place to find access to other resources not related to the Underground Railroad, as we've been talking about today. And just just to let you know, we really do want to have researchers come in and see us and work with our materials. It's something that we enjoy very much, and is part of being in the community, one of our favorite parts. On this slide, so of course, as we all know, the world is a different place right now. When the library is open to the public, I always welcome walk-ins, but I will say that to maximize your time, it always helps to consult with the archivist or the library staff. In ordinary times, I would encourage any educators to bring in, a class of their students so that we could look at some materials together. Unfortunately, we can't facilitate that right now, which I would just like to say on behalf of most librarians that I know, it's extremely difficult for us to not be in the building. It's I'm used to giving presentations where I can see people's faces and I can tell when they're, when I need to move on. And so this is just a completely different format. We're really excited to have people in person when it's safe. So this slide, I would just, again, like to reiterate that when it is safe to have people in the library, always feel free to come in, again, to maximize your time. A lot of times archivists are like 5 different people at once. Some days I'm wearing different hats, and it just really helps us be able to provide top rate service to you, which is always our goal. And, in addition to which, sometimes archival materials are they're delicate, and we want to be able to protect, our number one priority is protecting our historical documents so we can enjoy them in the future. We'll have everything ready for you when you get there. So don't hesitate to reach out. And this sort of just reinforces the point that we're temporarily closed to the patrons, but I will say that like many of my archivist colleagues throughout the United States, we are providing higher levels of sort of scanning. We're extending our understanding that people can't come in and visit, where usually, we would sort of ask that patrons come in and take notes on it rather than, photograph it or things of that nature. But right now, we are trying to be understanding. I fulfill reference requests several a week, so it's not an odd thing to ask if I can scan some things for you. I'd be happy to do it. We're still working with researchers, and that goes the same for educators. If there's any educators in the community who want to be able to provide their students with some resources, we're always here for you. So with all of that said, we are going to transition into my absolute favorite part of this presentation, which is to explore the question, our last question of the presentation. What are some other sources that I could use with my primary sources that I found in the archives? This is the best part about being an information professional, an archivist, or a librarian, is sharing sources with people. So if I get a little bit excited, I'm sure you guys will understand. So the first resource that I would like to highlight is one that that Jennifer Brown, our wonderful director, had pointed out to me. I'm from Michigan, and even though I'm from Michigan, this wasn't put in there in any way to advocate for Michigan. It's just an amazing resource, and no matter what state you live in, New York, Michigan, Alaska, this is an amazing resource that I encourage everyone to look at. So I'm going to transition over to their page now. So I kept this pop-up for the presentation. I haven't clicked on Don't Show Again because I wanted you to have a chance to read in their words. So the different sort of elements of their work. It's a database that's just been launched, so expect there to be changes and additions. As I had showed you earlier, I'm a huge fan of the advanced search function. From here, you can kind of get an idea of how they have organized their data. If you go to select status, you can see free person, enslaved person, master owner, indentured apprentice, or pawn. So there are hundreds of different ways that you can use this database to your advantage. And if you are not a advanced searcher, I enjoy this advanced search function, but if you want to do just a basic search, you can also do that. I would encourage everyone not only to use this as a resource, but in particular, I enjoy just looking through it, sort of on my time off and, at home, sometimes the data that you find on here is incredibly disturbing. And I think that it's important that this database was made. It really helps center the conversation around enslaved individuals and their experiences. With respect to books that we have in the library collection itself, the first thing I'm going to point out to you is the Encyclopedia of the Underground Railroad. This is in our reference collection. This is something that you could view if you came into the library. It is a great sort of starting point, jumping off point. I know that encyclopedias are kind of old hat now, and people are like, what's an encyclopedia and why would anyone want to use it? But I'm from the sort of old school belief that encyclopedias are still completely amazing. And in fact, I would argue that a resource like this is technically an encyclopedia. We just don't call it that. But at any rate, in this, I took some time with it, sort of perused the content in it. And I would say that it's a great place to find other primary sources. So often encyclopedias are kind of just quick little snippets, but they often include great places to check for other information. This second resource is a book that I read. I enjoyed it tremendously. I will say that one of the main reasons I enjoyed reading it is that it centered the conversation around the people that were experiencing enslavement, and also highlights how free Black individuals helped enslaved individuals on their journey to freedom. As you can see, it's checked out right now. Checked it out for the purposes of this presentation. I will be bringing it back, and I would highly recommend it. If you need help getting access to it, I would. It's a very well researched, but also very conversational in tone. Some other resources that I think are really great. So we have this Gateway to Freedom resource. Also another book, as you'll notice when I'm back on camera, I have both of these books behind me. They are incredible. I'm a huge fan of this author as an historian. He's a Pulitzer Prize winner, and for good reasons. He also did an excellent job of giving information about the Underground Railroad. Eric Foner, the author of this book, is really good at he's just great. I guarantee you'll enjoy that book. Finally, I want to highlight one of our other Peekskill residents, John Curran, has written an amazing book called Peekskill, Peekskill's African American History, a Hudson Valley's Communities Untold Story. We have a ton of copies of this, and John has done amazing work. He is actually with the Peekskill Museum. And I would definitely recommend either buying this or picking it up from the library. It's a great local history resource. And moving along, I also want to point out some other places that you can find information about the Underground Railroad. So one of my colleagues, Aaliyah, mentioned some social media groups that she found in Peekskill, for example, Peekskill's Hidden History. There's a Facebook group dedicated to that. And I am a huge fan of social media. The Archives has a social media page, but I would just like to, especially for young students and people that are working with primary sources for the first time, I would say that oftentimes we don't know where these, especially with the photograph groups, we don't know where these images came from. We don't know who owns the rights to them. It's really important to always cite your sources, even in social media. If you see a photo, a lot of times they come from small historical groups, such as the Peekskill Museum. And when you don't give credit to the museum. It can't get back to them. Researchers can't be brought back to them. So I would say social media is a really good source, but you definitely want to consult other sources, sort of as to double and triple check your work. So a really great documentary that I watched that we have in our collection is called just plainly Underground Railroad. It was really great. It was I think it was like an hour and a half long, something that I really enjoyed. Although I will say that the William Still story, I think, is another really great. This kind of had a more in-depth coverage of the Underground Railroad, not specific to the Hudson Valley, but nevertheless a resource that we hold in and very interesting documentary. And then finally, Harriet, which is the very popular, I think, I can't remember who released it. Is it? Yeah, I don't remember the production company, but at any rate, we do have the movie Harriet, which was wildly popular. It is currently available right now. So if you put it on hold now, you could be watching it next, in the next week or so. A really great movie and an award-winning performance. So finally, I would just sort of like to end the presentation heartily thanking everybody who came here. I really appreciate your attention. This is our first presentation of 2021. We really enjoyed having you. I'm so sorry. I would really love to get back, but I'm just going to go back to my the presentation because I don't know what I'm doing right now. So sorry. 1 second.
Rachel, would you like me to stop the recording?
Well, I'll just, I guess, before we stop the recording, I just want to thank everyone for coming today. I really appreciated your attention. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, we're going to cover the questions after we finish the recording, after we stop the recording. So if you're still here, sit tight. I'll be able to answer some questions. So yeah, let's end it now. Thank you, Francisco, for keeping on top of it. I got a little bit